AM 1240 and W240DF-FM 95.9 Freeport, New York.
And now, live from the WGBB studios in Merrick, New York, it's the Joey Petroni Show with your host, Joey Petroni.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining another episode of the Joey Petroni Show. I am your guest host for today, Stacey Pryce. You can find me online at Price on Purpose. Today's guest for today is Maria Daniels. She is an entrepreneur out of Ohio. Maria, how are you today?
I am doing great, Stacey. How are you?
Sensational, you know.
Oh yeah. A little dehydrated, but that's about it, right?
Legit. Maria and I were just talking. I was like, oh my God, I'm a little cold. I didn't drink enough water today. And she's like, big shocker, you never do. So something I'm working on, something that you're helping me with as a friendly reminder. So I really appreciate it.
I'm here for you.
Thanks. Maria, so you have a podcast called Successfully Chaotic. How long have you been doing the show and what is it about?
Well, I started recording in 2019, but I didn't drop it until early 2020, right before COVID, when pretty much everybody started a podcast. I didn't know it was going to be like the new in thing. I got in right on time. Mm-hmm. And the show is about just kind of the balance between entrepreneurship and real life.
Yes, 100%. And what I like about your show that I know about, because it's awesome. What I like about it is it brings entrepreneurship into a realistic vision, because I think sometimes it could sound super glamorous to start your own business, which it is. But it also shows that just because you deal with, say, struggles, or if you have, say, barriers or so, you can get past them. Can you share a little bit about maybe things that you do to deal with the barriers that can happen in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, first of all, I like what you said right there about how a lot of people think it's glamorous, because I think I also did when I first started my business, because you see all of these social media posts where people are, sitting by the pool with their laptop, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I want. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to sit by my pool with my laptop. And I think I've had like 3 days like that ever in my whole life at this point, because most days are just not like that. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people who kind of start on that journey, if that is what you think every day is going to look like, I think that's where they think they're not, quote unquote, making it. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's a very important part. Not that you can't have days like that. Right. I could probably have more days like that if my life wasn't so full and busy in other areas, but that's not going to be the day-to-day. That's not the life of the entrepreneur, as much as that's what social media likes to show us. In all reality, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of questioning yourself. It's a lot of pivoting and changing and having to kind of be flexible and go with the flow. And I love it, though. I mean, and I think that's the crazy thing, is that there are times, and because we talk, that, there are times where I am like over it and I like fake quit, but at the end of the day, I would be miserable if I actually gave it up. Yeah. And I think that's the huge thing, right? I think it's talking about all the angles of it, the days that you feel on top of the world and everything seems to be lining up, and then also the days where you are just like over it, nothing is working out, and you want to fake quit.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also like, yes, there's going to be those moments where you celebrate, but then like the fake quitting thing, oh my God, well, you and I also talk about that. Like, it's tough, because it's like it's literally, I guess you could say it's kind of like raising a child. I mean, you do have 7, so tell us. Yes,
I do have 7, and I know that usually is the first thing that people remember. And they're like, "Are you the one that has the 7 kids?" Yes, I'm the one that has the 7 kids. But yeah, I have 7 kids, and it is a lot like parenting, because having a kid is the most wonderful thing in the world, but there's also so many hard days, and there are days where you're looking at them like, what the heck did I do? And again, I wouldn't change it though. It's not like I would be like, go back and change anything. The same thing with the business. So you are going to have those moments. And, using that same analogy, when you first start your business, it's kind of like that newborn baby, right? So that newborn baby smell, everything is great, and you're on top of the world, and nothing can go wrong. And then, they kind of get to that toddler stage where they're into everything, and then the business is the same way. It goes through this own little toddler phase, and it keeps going through all the stages. And I think that is the reality of just being able to maintain your enthusiasm through business ownership, is being able to realize that you are going to go through, those normal stages. And outside of those normal stages, you're going to have just things that happen, right? Yeah. The economy is different now than when I first started my business, right?
Right.
I know with one of the businesses I own, it's a cafe. We were supposed to open May 5th of 2020. Mm-hmm. Well, we know what happened in 2020. I did not open May 5th of 2020. I didn't get to open that cafe until 2021 because of COVID. Mm-hmm. That was not in any business plan that I ever wrote.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I could have not opened. I could have, changed my mind and not opened. But, I pivoted. I changed on what I was going to do. And, even since opening, we've kind of changed a little bit. And I think that's part of it, kind of growing along with your business, just like you do whenever, as a parent. You're a different parent with your 16-year-old than you was with your 1-year-old.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's interesting you said that, because I think with different businesses, the way you kind of connect with them are going to be different. Because as you're talking from perspective, like you have multiple businesses that you run. I actually want to discuss that a little bit, because you're a mother of 7, you have multiple businesses, and you continue to go through that path. For some people, they may be listening like, how the heck? I think that's the first thing they think, like, how the heck does a woman with 7 children, multiple businesses, even start and keep going? Like, what is the one thing, or is there one thing that keeps you on this path and you haven't like turned away yet? Well, you fake turned away.
Multiple times. I've fake turned away lots of times.
Yeah. So what's keeping you going?
Honestly, there's a couple of things. But number one, I want to be able to tell my kids that I didn't quit because I got hard. I think there are very good reasons to quit, because I know this is something we've talked about even. Mm-hmm. That whole hustle and grind mentality in the business world, I don't necessarily agree with it. I agree with parts of it. If you are trying to do something very specific, yes, hustle and grind and get it done. Yeah. If you feel like it's not lining up in that moment, or maybe just for good, it's okay to change your mind and quit. And I think that is, again, something that needs to be discussed, because, there are businesses that I've had I decided was not for me. I had a boutique for a while, and I sold that. I had a screen printing business for a while. I sold that. Both of those were not a fit for me. I didn't have a passion in either one. It was just something I got into to make some money, and I had no problem quitting those. But with some of my other things, I have a why behind them. I have a passion in that industry that keeps me going, because I want to do a great job in that industry, because I love the industry. And then I also want to show my kids exactly the things that I try to say, that, if it's something that you feel you're supposed to do, then you do it.
Yes. Heck yeah. I love that, because I think just human nature sometimes, the fear seems louder than the reasons why. The reasons why can be like whispers, because at least, that happened to me, where it's like, okay, I want you to quit your job, and I want you to go all in on this hobby that you've been working on. You know what I mean? And that voice to me was a little bit lower than the voice that said, hey, Stace, like, you work a 9 to 5. Why don't you just stay there? Why don't you just kind of like make this work out for you? And not that there's anything wrong with the 9 to 5. 9 to 5s are great. But I think for some of us, we get into that space where the comfort zone is like it feels so good, because it's just like, I have everything I need. I've got my benefits. I've got everything. Why would I even go into entrepreneurship where everything's going to be on me? So like for you, like, is it that you had the whys and they were quiet or loud? Like, how did that voice come to you, or how did that vision come to you?
I wouldn't even say it was a vision, to be honest. Like, I had my wellness company just kind of on the side. I kind of freelanced in that. But when I quit my job, it's not because, like, the clouds parted and angels came down to me and said, this is it. This is your moment. That did not happen. I was having to work just all these hours. And at the time, I had 5 of my 7 kids, and my 5th child's on the spectrum. And it's, you know, for anybody that has a special needs kid, you have a different child every day, basically. And so it was just really hard to work someone else's schedule.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much that I had this vision and this dream. To be honest, I impulsively quit my job because I felt like I was failing my child at that moment, and then ugly cried all the way home.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a vision as much as it was just something I felt like I had to do. But I had no plan. There was no like plan, like, oh, I'm going to start a business. No, it was like I actually had no idea what I was going to do.
Right.
And I started freelancing for a bit just in the marketing world. And it's funny, because I mentioned that I have the wellness company. I didn't even count that as a business then, because I knew nothing about owning my own business. I just knew before I got into marketing, I was a trainer, and I never wanted to stop training, so I just still did it on the side, just freelance for different people. But I didn't count that as a business. I didn't really run it like a business. I just ran it kind of like a hobby that I kind of got paid for, you know. And
are you telling my story?
It's funny. Like, I never thought about it until after I actually really started my business and started figuring out a lot about business, which we can have a whole conversation about that. But then I looked back and went, wait, I've had a business this whole time. The only thing I hadn't done was register it as an LLC because I was running just under my name as a sole proprietorship. So, you know, it's just funny how I kind of knew, you know, a little bit about running a business from one angle, but didn't understand all of it because I didn't really know that I was running a business.
Right. Oh my God. It's, I was about to say, you know, it sounds like you're telling pieces of my story, because that's what I did. I ugly cried on the way home after quitting a job. And I was just like, you know what, I got to get out of here. I got to do what I'm meant to do, or what I'm called to do, or what I feel inside. And I think the beauty is you actually, you know what's going to happen, but you don't know. Like, you actually don't know. You don't have all the steps in front of you. You kind of have step 1, which is like ugly cry on the way home. And then you kind of just like put the pieces together. So in a sense, like, you're making your own puzzle masterpiece, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and, you know, I also want to kind of say, because this is actually a conversation I had with somebody the other day. You know, even when you feel kind of, maybe somebody goes to like calling to quit their job, or they need to quit for whatever reason, there's also time, even as an entrepreneur, where it's okay to take a job back, or to work part-time, or to do both. And I think that's another thing. We tend to feel like we have to be stuck in one lane or the other.
Correct.
And I don't think you have to. You know, I don't work outside of my businesses now, but if I ever had the right offer, maybe I would.
Yeah.
I would jokingly say that I'm completely unemployable at this point. But because I've not had a schedule for so long. However, you know, you just never know. And I think, you know, the real joy of entrepreneurship is being able to design your own life. You're designing your own life. And so if, you know, today you feel like, you know, just running your own business is a thing to do, and tomorrow you feel like you're going to go work a 9-to-5 and hit the pause button on that for a little bit, it's fine. Or if you want to try to do both, that's fine. And I think, you know, that right there is the essence of entrepreneurship, is being able to kind of decide for yourself.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I love that, because it's literally allowing yourself to pivot as needed, and you're not stuck. Like, I had that feeling where I felt like I was stuck. I was like, oh my God, like, if this doesn't work, like, I'm a failure. You know what I mean? As far as whether it's entrepreneurship or working 9-to-5. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, like, my life is build as you go. Like, I am in control of it, and I can actually, like, okay, if I'm going to do a 9-to-5 here, but then still work on my own thing, that I can do that, or vice versa. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I think that's the thing. Just like you were, you know, you touched upon social media earlier and how sometimes it can look like this glamorous thing, or I think you get like both sides sometimes on social media, and then you don't know where you're gonna lie, because it's like it could show like your private jet and like how it's so amazing, but then it could show like I live in my car. So yeah. I guess you kind of have to like try it.
Well, I'm not at either one. I'm kind of like right there in the middle. But you know, I think the entrepreneurship journey has taught me more about myself than I ever realized too. That when I first started my marketing company, to be specific, when I first started it, I still didn't really understand the why behind I was starting it. It was just more like, okay, well, I've been doing all this freelance marketing work. You know, my accountant's like, hey, you need to kind of think about starting an LLC with this, you know, since you're doing all this side work now, just start your own business. I'm like, oh, okay. Again, not a dream, not a goal, not a nothing. And then when I started it, I was not sure how to kind of make it my own. So I was trying to run it like companies I'd worked for, which the hilarious part of that is
that interesting?
I absolutely hated them.
But it's like it's from a place of knowing.
I didn't know what to do.
Exactly. It's like that's what you know, though. So it's like, what else am I going to do? But you kind of build it as you go. But say more about that. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it kind of goes back to parenting again, too, right? We tend to, a lot of times, accidentally parent the way that we were parented a lot of times. Because I can remember with my oldest kids, because my kids range in age. My oldest is 25 and my youngest is 7, as you know. So there's like all the ages in there. With my oldest, specifically, there would be times where I'd say something and she'd go, but why? And honestly, I had no idea. I didn't know. No clue. My mom said it. That's why.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Because
and then I had to ask myself, like, is that what I really think? Is that what I really want her to do? Like, why do I want that? You know? And it wasn't necessarily that it was wrong. It was just like, if I didn't even understand why I wanted her to do that, why was I asking her to do that?
That's true. I mean, I think that's why, maybe that's why we all have kids. It's like, we just need somebody to check us.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because, like I said, my youngest is 7 now. And, well, you know her. She's so funny.
She's so funny.
And I know my oldest she'll say, you would have never let me get by with that. And I'm like, listen, you were my first. You were a guinea pig kid. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, tried stuff with you and hoped that you would be okay. And, you know, she is. She's great. And, you know, it's just funny because you learn more. And it's the same thing in the business world. My first business I started, I, didn't start the exact same way as other businesses I've started because I've already made some of the mistakes in those. And so when I started a different business, I knew some of the things to not get hung up on.
Yes.
And it takes time. I'm sure I'll make lots and lots more mistakes, And I think that is kind of the beauty of it is there's nobody that's going to not make a mistake on any of it, on parenting or business ownership. And if you already kind of know that, it takes the pressure off a little bit.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point there. It's you got to jump in, and I think it's the leap of faith. It's you don't have all the answers, even though you would like to. That's just like the human way. It's like I want to know what to expect. I want to know what's going to happen, but the only way to do that is by starting and taking that next step. I wanted to talk a little bit about your podcast. So venturing from business ownership and starting this podcast. So you touched upon it a little bit earlier, Successfully Chaotic. You started this in 2020. So what year is it? 2024? Is it 2024? It's 2024. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how many years is that? All right. So
I know. It was crazy. I was thinking about the other day. I'm like, wait.
You're like, wait, what?
Because I was telling somebody I used to call myself the accidental podcaster. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember. That's what I was just going to talk about because I'm just like, wait a minute. Is it still an accident now? Because you've been doing it for like 4 years?
No, I don't think I can. I had to take that away. I'm like, I can't say that anymore because it doesn't even make sense now.
I mean, you could accidentally record a show weekly, I guess.
True. I could. Yeah, it's the whole podcasting thing wasn't something I thought I was going to do forever. I thought it was going to be this thing that I did to kind of, get out there and talk about some of my experiences. And, to be honest, it was also just this big breakout of completely cracking that shell of who I was supposed to be as a professional, as a business owner, as a mom, as a woman, as all the things. And honestly, it was like therapy. Especially if you go and listen to my early episodes. I don't, because I don't like listening to my own stuff, and I'm sure they're hot garbage.
You did good. You did good.
They were very therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
And the best thing that I ever did.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden I felt so free, because it was my microphone. It was my show. I could say there was not rules. I could say whatever I wanted to. And I felt free. I didn't have anybody telling me that, oh, you shouldn't say that as a business owner. Oh, no. As a girl, we need to talk like this. It was, I was allowed to be who I was, and it was very freeing. And the show kind of, turned a little bit to also just talking about, business and, even parenting sometimes and some different things, but that authentic, kind of structure, that authentic core is still there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know from experience, because I listen to every episode of yours, gratefully, you are on season 10, focusing on Reconnect and Thrive. Do you want to share a little bit about why this was, because you kind of told me, what was it, before this season started, you're like, I think it was Reconnect and Thrive, we're going to be talking about this. Why did you feel like that was something we should discuss with entrepreneurship?
Well, I think as an entrepreneur, and even again as a mom and as a woman, just me, from my standpoint, there was all these things kind of out there, right, that I was trying to check off and do and, fix and, get to this point and do this. And even though I've done a lot, and I mean a lot, of inner work, like the last few years specifically, I know there's always more to be done. And one of those things is just the ability to just stop and pause and breathe and not have this giant to-do list all the time and not have this giant goal list all the time. And this was the first year that I didn't sit down and write all these huge goals.
Interesting.
And I think the reason was I needed a break from it. It's not that I don't have some small goals. It's not like I'm sitting here just like, oh, well, whatever happens this year happens. But, there is a little bit of that and a little bit of things that I'm just kind of letting flow a little bit and kind of guiding it a little bit. And I'm just kind of letting it be, because I tend to be an all-in type of person, which is good in some ways. But in some ways, it also can burn you out.
Yeah.
And I've been to burnout before, back in 2019. That was another reason that, I started recording for the podcast, because I started recording, like I said earlier, in 2019 to be able to release it early 2020, because I needed a break. I had so much like frustration and just stress and all these things that had been building up inside of me for so long, that, when you keep sweeping stuff under the rug, that rug gets pretty full. And then before you know it, things are just blasting out everywhere. Yeah. I don't ever want to feel like that again. And so now I'm very cognizant about burnout. And I noticed last year that, I had a lot of changes, because life, right? Things change and pivot and on their own. And life had a lot of changes last year. And, so as that was happening, I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to just impulsively, jump and try to drive this and jump and try to drive that. I want to take a step back and breathe, kind of reflect on some things and figure out what I really want to do or need to do. Yeah. And I think that is a big step for me, if you know me, and you know me. Yes. That's a huge step for me.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's amazing. I like that you focused on kind of, I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves and we want this giant goal or something like that. But I think at the end of the day, if we maybe set smaller goals to eventually get to the big goal, that can be easier to digest and look at. And you also can kind of be a little more strategic versus the rush. Because I think, well, what you and I have in common is that we kind of like had that ugly cry home from like leaving a job. Mm-hmm. And when you kind of try and pick up things like that, it's just like you're kind of frantic and you're just going with whatever works. But if you kind of make it into smaller pieces, for you, of course, it could be easily obtainable in a sense, or better to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think it's also just much less stressful.
Yeah.
You know, it's much less stressful to let it flow. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's also being realistic enough to know that I can't just step back and just let things, you know, fall apart and slip away. But not to force anything, not to try to have all these, you know, huge steps or, you know, huge growth goals. It's more about looking, what am I doing now? What am I spending my time on now? Because one thing I figure out when I do this, I've never done it for this full amount of time that I've done it right now, but I've done it in short bursts where I look at, you know, my calendar and how I'm spending my time and, you know, why I'm spending my time doing that, because that's a big one. And it's funny how much you end up realizing that you do all these things that you think you have to do that you don't have to do. It's weird. I was spending, and I think me and you talked about this one time, I was coming into the office for normal work hours all the time. And even if I had nothing that I needed to be here for, I was just here in my office.
I need to show face.
Because I didn't know how to not do that.
Yeah.
And I had to give myself permission, like, listen, this is part of the perks. There's some crappy parts about being an entrepreneur sometimes. There's some perks. This happens to be a perk.
Yeah.
You know, I can work from my house. I can, you know, take a day off. I can, whatever, work half day. You know, there's some perks.
Yeah.
But I wasn't even taking advantage of the perks. I was trying to, like, you know, squeeze into what I was used to, you know, in normal work day, where I felt like I wasn't being productive. But when I made myself look at what I was doing, I was like wasting so much time, just like sitting here doing nothingness because I was in the office, I was working, and I think we can accidentally do that.
Yeah,
you know,
I need to plan.
Be sitting at our desk, you know, quote unquote at work, and not getting anything accomplished. So I would rather make my time more purposeful, and that allows me more time to do things that I really love to do. I love to hike. I love to kayak. I love to do things outdoors. And obviously sitting in my office is not outdoors. So, you know, I had to start being more realistic. You know, there are times where I need to be in my office. You know, I have clients, I have responsibilities, but there's lots of times that I don't. Yeah. And it's, I think, a lot about, you know, this season is, you know, number one, giving people that permission, not that we need it, but sometimes I think it's nice to, hey, you know what, you can do this. You can, you know, look at your schedule. You can figure out what works for you, what doesn't, you know. Exactly. Giving people the permission. I had to give myself permission. Yeah. And then giving people some steps on, you know, how to look at what they're doing in their business and make it more fruitful. Because that was a big one for me. I always call it my needle movers. And I tell people, what are your needle movers in your business? Because those are the things that matter. Heck yeah. What's moving the needle right now, not what you want it to do later. You
like eventually I want the needle too.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, that's a big one. Like, what's moving the needles? If it's, you know, something that's not moving the needle, then it's not demanding your time right now. You can put it for later. And, you know, you have to also always, of course, look at, I mentioned I like hiking. What do you like to do? Because if you're just doing these things that you don't like to do all the time, you're not balancing that with things that you like to do, you're going to end up miserable.
Exactly.
Completely miserable.
I call it the reset time allocation, because you know, take even a screenshot of yourself. Like, as we close now, I just want to round this up, but you know, take a look at where you're spending your time and like be aware, like journal yourself, like really look at where you're spending your time, like what are you doing with that time. And when you take a look at it for like a day, a week, or whatever your time frame is, like make adjustments, and it's totally fine. Like, you don't have to set it in stone. And I think that's what the beauty of entrepreneurship and podcasting is about. But as we close, Maria, I want to thank you so much for your time. As always, you guys can find Maria Daniels online at successfullychaotic.com. And you could also listen to our podcast. Season 10 is out right now for you to listen everywhere you listen to podcasts. That is on Successfully Chaotic. Guys, I want to thank WGBB Radio for having me as a guest host today for the Joey Petroni Show. And I want to thank you all for listening and have a great rest of your day.
WGBB 1240 AM and 95.9 FM.